So I've got them all over here, and a little trick you do to just keep them so they can survive the winter is you make a little thingy like this, right? Doesn't weigh that much. Right, you put that Hey, it's Greg here with maritimegardening.com, and I'm out here in the garden, and I thought I'd give you a little tip for getting your biennial plants to go to seed so you can save seeds. Anyone that was gardening last year at the sort of height of the COVID-19 shutdown probably realized that seeds became a little bit unavailable. And if you grow biennial plants, you can save the seeds, but it's different than with your annual. So an annual plant is a plant that the seed germinates, the plant puts out foliage. At some point during that same season, it puts out a flower. The flower makes a seed. You can save the seed and plant it next year. A biennial plant, as opposed to a perennial plant, is a plant that in year one, the seed germinates, puts out foliage. You get lots of vegetation, but it doesn't make seeds. The plant goes dormant over the course of the winter. Following spring, the root sends up foliage, and at some point in the summer, usually, I don't know, July probably, maybe August, depends on the plant, it makes flowers. Flowers make a seed in the second year, and you save the seeds. One thing I neglected to mention in this video is to remind you to use open pollinated varieties for this sort of thing rather than hybrid varieties. You know, you go to buy seeds from a seed provider, they're going to have hybrid varieties, they're going to have open pollinated varieties. Sometimes they'll say they've got an heirloom variety. An heirloom variety is just a type of open pollinated variety. It's been around for a long time. Sometimes people use the point of reference of the Second World War, but it doesn't really matter. It's just a open pollinated variety. It's been around for a long time. Open pollinated variety of plant is a plant that when it makes seeds, those seeds remain true to type. That is to say that when those seeds are planted in the ground, the plant you get from the seeds is the same as the one you got them from. If you try to save the seeds from a hybrid plant, the resulting plant from those seeds may resemble its parent or may not resemble it at all. You really don't know. It's basically a hybrid plant is a new combination of two different varieties of a given plant, and the outcome may or may not be true to type. It may resemble one of the parents and not the other parent. It may be a great plant, it might be a terrible plant, you just don't know. So if you're going to save your own seeds, use open pollinated varieties of seeds. If you talk to your seed provider, they're going to be able to usually have a list of which varieties are and aren't open pollinated. But depending on where you live, how far north you are, what growing zone you are, and other conditions as well, because I'm in zone 6A, but some of the things that can survive a zone 6A winter don't survive here because the ground gets so wet and so frozen. Nova Scotia, where I live, is kind of unique because the winter, the coldest it might get is like minus 20 Celsius, but because in the winter in January and February we'll have a week where it gets above zero, and then a week where it goes to minus 20 Celsius. So all the snow will melt, it'll go into the ground, and then the ground will freeze solid, so the ground becomes ice. And some plants just can't take being frozen like that, as opposed to like a winter in some place like northern Ontario, where the ground is covered in snow all winter. In fact, the actual soil stays a bit warmer like that because it's insulated by the snow from the cold in the air. Whereas with here, the ground is 0 Celsius and it goes down a couple feet like that. It's ice. The ground just turns into ice. And so I have found with carrots in particular, I just cannot get them to survive the winter here. So that even though a carrot's a biennial, the carrot root does not survive the winter. The plant does not go to flower in the second year. The same is the case for a lot of different kinds of kale. I find kale, the plant dies back in the winter, doesn't come back in the spring. The root freezes to death when it's encased in ice like that. I find parsnips survive the winter, no problem. And I find salsify, kind of exotic plant, survives the winter, no problem. But kale and carrots don't. So there's an easy trick for all that. You take those plants And wherever you were growing them, you pick them up with a nice ball of soil and you put them somewhere else, right? Because another reason you want to move them is when that plant goes to flower, when it goes to seed, that second year, it becomes an enormous plant. One kale plant will take up an area maybe 2 by 2 or 3 by 3, right? That foliage, this kale plant will be like this high next year. It'll be 3 feet high and 3 feet wide. Right, so you don't want it growing in the garden bed where it actually started growing. It'll cast so much shade, it'll inhibit the growth of whatever vegetable you're trying to grow there. So you sort of want these things off on their own space so they're not interrupting the growth pattern of the other things that you're going to grow in that bed that year. All right, so here we got a parsnip plant, or a parsnip, got a kale plant growing here. And you know, when I'm saving seeds from things, I like to, take note of individual qualities of things. This kale plant just grew on its own here in my walking path in the sand. Now if you go down deep enough, I mulched this garden for years with wood chips. So there's pretty good soil underneath this sand. But basically a kale seed landed in the sand here somewhere and just found its own way to have a life. And that kind of tenacity, I think, is admirable in a plant. So I want the seeds from this kale plant because I think it's a tough old SOB, and that's the kind of things I want. I want tenacious plants that, can adapt to a variety of conditions. So I'll try to get this guy out. Not the best thing for the roots, but I'll shake off some of that sand there. Okay, I'll move him over to the garden. All right, so here we got parsnip garden, and I got some parsnips growing here. Doesn't look like much, but the frost has been working on them, so they've fallen down a bit. But mark my words, there are parsnips here. All right, I think these ones are a little bit bigger. Ideally you want to, you're saving your own seeds. You want to select for certain kind of growing habit. Size is a good one. Some sort of root or something in there, a rock. Will not come out. Let's go from this side. That's a big old one. Nice one. Big fatty. Hopefully I haven't messed the root ball up too bad. All right, so yeah, this parsnip, I did a bit of a butcher job in getting it out of the ground. So, you have to be intrepid with these things. Don't worry so much about whether it's going to work or not. Just do it and see what happens. I mean, trying to do my best to protect the fine root hairs. So I mean, this parsnip, I really didn't do a good job of preserving the root ball, the fine root hairs and everything. But I mean, the parsnip has a lot of energy stored up in its root, and I think next spring it'll just root out more because it's sort of saved energy for that purpose. So I think it'll be okay. If it isn't okay, who cares? Maybe I'll leave a couple parsnips in the garden where I took this from, just in case. That's another thing with doing stuff like that. Always have a plan B. I have done this in the past in the spring where I've picked the parsnips up and moved them. And the parsnip, it doesn't need to be under this dome. The parsnips are tough. They'll take the winter, at least where I live anyway. They're tough as nails, so they can handle the cold. So they don't need the protection. I'm just putting them all here so that they're in one place, right? And don't worry about, parsnips and carrots seem similar, but I did a bunch of reading on this, and as far as I understand, they will not cross-pollinate with one another. That's a bit of a myth. People think they will because they look so similar, but they won't. Man, I'm into something down here. A log or some damn thing. Hopefully I can get enough of this out to get my kale in. Yeah, it's okay. So I've got them all over here, and a little trick you do to just keep them so they can survive the winter is you make a little thingy like this, right? There's just a 6x6 wood nailed together, a little bit of plastic on the top, and I put a couple of these bamboo dollar store jobbies, little notch here in the wood to keep a sort of dome effect. Doesn't weigh that much. Right, you put that over the top of your plants. You jam some hay or some leaves or whatever in like that to insulate it so that it doesn't get too cold. This is sitting on top of a log here. I'll probably jam some fabric or something. You put grass in here too, whatever, right? You want to sort of just caulk that up to an extent, corking or whatever, you know. Put something in there. I'd use fabric, some old rags or something like that. So it's sealed, right? This is unnecessary right now. It's still relatively warm. But in December, basically, when I see all the plants here starting to die back, I'm going to let them complete their life cycle, right? They're still growing. They're still green. So there's no point in having this on here right now. But when I see them getting to a point where they're finishing up their life cycle for the year, all the greenery is starting to die back, they're done growing for the year, right? They're going dormant. Then I'll put this on here. And what that does is it just changes the microclimate these are growing in. Instead of them being in zone 6 for the winter, they're in zone 7. And it just gives them that much more of a chance of making it through the winter and coming back the following spring and making seeds. So, I've got a whole bunch of seeds from salsify, a whole bunch of seeds from parsnip, a whole bunch of seeds from carrots, and a whole bunch of seeds from kale last year. Every year I save thousands and thousands of seeds from these things. That's the trick I use in my situation to make sure. I mean, maybe you will live just in one of those magical places where the plant just makes it through the winter without any help. So even then, it's probably worthwhile to move them off to their own space so they're not messing up the garden bed where you took them from, so you can plant some other thing there. But anyway, those are some tricks, just some considerations, how I would deal with that sort of thing. So I hope you found that interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. Check out my podcast, maritimegardening.com. And until next time, get out there, get at it, have fun in your garden. Thanks for watching.